The arguments for the existence of God are like the lyrics to familiar television jingles. Sure, intelligent design doesn't make a lot of sense, but everybody knows the words, and sometimes it's fun to sing along. So, the Thinking Atheist presents our top 10 favorite creationist arguments. Number 1. Carbon dating isn't accurate to determine the age of the Earth. Well, perhaps that's why carbon dating isn't the preferred method for dating rocks and fossils. In fact, there are a great many methods of radiometric dating that accurately measure the decay of radioactive elements in rocks, meteorites, and fossils. And those methods can confidently measure the age of planet Earth to be 4.5 billion years. Number 2. You can't prove evolution. As opposed to proving the young Earth theory from primitive anonymous documents? Well, actually, man has unlocked the world of genetics to reveal that all living things have and do evolve, and that similarities exist between the DNA of plants, animals, and humans alike. Evolution is observable, provable science. To quote the famous evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould, creationist critics often charge that evolution cannot be tested and therefore cannot be viewed as a properly scientific subject at all. This claim is rhetorical nonsense. Number 3. If man evolved from monkeys, why do we still have monkeys? This is like asking, if America was colonized by the English, why do we still have England? Next question, please. Number 4. The human eye is too complex to have evolved. This argument is also known as irreducible complexity. This gross oversimplification ignores creatures like the single-celled euglena, which have evolved antennae for light. Mollusks and jellyfish have evolved varying grades of vision. Plus, consider this, the human eye is more poorly constructed and much less acute than the eye of the octopus or the great horned owl. Did God care more about the design of the horned owl than his own children? Number 5. Atheism is actually a religion. Indeed, much like not collecting stamps might be called a hobby, or not smoking might be called a habit. Number 6. Oh yeah? Well, scientist X believes in God. Well, that's nice. So did icons like Copernicus, Kepler, and Galileo, who also lived during the time of dirt floors, bleeding sick people to cure them of illness, and burning witches at the stake. Sir Isaac Newton was a believer and theologian. He was also an alchemist. Did Newton's groundbreaking research on gravity and the laws of motion also prove his belief that metals had magical powers and could be combined to make gold? Cherry pick all you want. The fact is, 93% of the members of the National Academy of Sciences reject the concept of God. That's not just a majority, it's an overwhelming majority. In fact, this is just a sampling of the reputable scientific organizations that reject intelligent design and support evolution by natural selection. Number 7. So you're saying that everything happened by chance? No. Well, chance certainly plays a part in the evolutionary cycle, but natural selection promotes non-random change of specific desirable traits over time. Living organisms didn't just pop into existence by chance, but they did evolve over millions, sometimes billions of years. Number 8. America was founded as a Christian nation. Actually, the U.S. Constitution never mentions God, and the mention of religion in Article 6 and the First Amendment serve to separate religion from government altogether. The words "In God We Trust" weren't printed on American coins until 1863, after a religious surge during the Civil War. Paper money didn't have it until 1957. The words "under God" weren't even in the original Pledge of Allegiance. They were added by Congress in 1954. And many of our founding fathers were either deist or ambivalent about the Christian God, including Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, John Adams, Thomas Paine, and even George Washington. Number 9. The second law of thermodynamics. We love this argument because it is thrown out so flippantly and with so little understanding. In a nutshell, the second law of thermodynamics says that systems must become more disordered over time. So, complex living cells and organisms couldn't have come out of basic inanimate chemicals. In other words, more time means more chaos. What creationists fail to mention is that this law only works in a closed system where no energy or matter leaves or enters. The Earth is not a closed system. It receives outside heat and light from our sun's nuclear fusion, fueling simple organisms so that they can become more complex by consuming other forms of life and non-living materials. Here's an easy way to frustrate this argument when a Christian brings up the second law of thermodynamics. Ask him what the other laws are. When he shrugs and stares into space, you'll know how truly informed he is on the subject. And finally, number 10, our favorite. Adolf Hitler was an atheist. Well, actually, Hitler was raised Roman Catholic. In Mein Kampf, Hitler speaks of the creator of the universe and says the Aryan race was created by God. His religious views, or lack of them, remain in dispute. But using the name of history's greatest tyrant isn't an argument. It's a provocation that has nothing to do with the concept of evolution or creation. Invoking Hitler is a hot button designed to distract people from the true evidence that God only exists in the imagination of man. So there they are, our top 10 favorite creationist arguments. The next time you come up against one of these, just remember that your worldview is based on evidence. Their worldview includes an invisible divine daddy, 2 naked people and a talking snake, contradictory documents written in the Bronze Age, the wearing of torture devices around one's neck, and bumper stickers that proudly say, 7 days without prayer makes 1 week. For the record, we're not sure the creationist argument could be much weaker. We're just saying. Because the response to our first top 10 list was so great, and because there's so much good material out there, we humbly present another top 10 favorite creationist arguments. Number 1. The God of the Gaps. Essentially, any hole or gap that remains unexplained by science must be an act of God. Gaps in the fossil record? No problem. God did it. How did the human eye become so incredibly complex? God did it. What explains the precise orbit of the planets within the solar system? God did it. Throughout our history, primitive man's understanding had enormous gaps, and God became a convenient explanation for all sorts of things, like tornadoes, solar eclipses, good or bad crops, rainbows, diseases, volcanic eruptions, and more. But as man's understanding of science has grown, the God of the gaps has continued to shrink. Number 2. Well, what came before the Big Bang? Science simply doesn't know. But science will honestly admit that and continue searching for the answers. If you insist on placing God into that gap, we'd like to counter with our assertion that the Big Bang was actually created by an extraterrestrial named Ted, who accidentally blew up his apartment while trying to make beer. You have your unsubstantiated theories, we have ours. Number 3. The Bible tells me so. This is a fun little piece of circular reasoning. How do you know the Bible is the Word of God? Because the Bible tells me so. But why do you believe the Bible? Because it's infallible. But how do you know it's infallible? Because the Word of God is true, and so on. The Bible simply proves itself. The argument also works for the Quran, the Torah, the Book of Mormon, Tobin's Spirit Guide, and the best-selling works of L. Ron Hubbard. Number 4. Morality doesn't exist without God. Actually, the Bible itself talks about how salvation is by grace and good works isn't enough for salvation. So those not saved can do good works. There's a wide number of non-religious charities and aid organizations. Besides, if you're looking for morality, you probably want to steer clear of the God of the Bible, who advocates genocide, rape, incest, the slaughter of babies, kidnapping, and slavery. If you're interested, we have a whole webpage dedicated to this stuff. Number 5. But you can't take the Bible literally. Well, of course not. It's only the foundational document for millions of people worldwide. The perfect, divinely inspired Word of Almighty God. Of course, a perfect God would create an imperfect Bible. Number 6. I had a personal experience, and you can't tell me it didn't happen. Okay, we won't. We won't challenge your assertion that you heard God's voice, or that you received a divine healing, or that you approached death and saw a bright light, or that God spoke to you in a dream or vision. But we will say that people have also sworn they were abducted by aliens, taken rides on Halley's Comet, heard audible voices, and seen the image of Elvis manifested on a piece of white toast. To quote one of our heroes, James Randi, no amount of belief makes something a fact. Number 7. Who are you to question the existence of God? Well, I'm an adult male, 6'1", brown hair, brown eyes. I like music, movies, books, sushi, long walks on the beach. You're kidding, right? No mere human has a right to test his belief system? We're not worthy enough to demand proof? Under that incredibly flawed logic, you could pretty much worship anything. Number 8. Pascal's wager. The argument made famous by 17th century French philosopher Blaise Pascal, which asserts that if you believe in God and you're wrong, you lose nothing. But if you reject God and you're wrong, you lose everything. So why not believe? Essentially, Pascal's wager is the coward's way out. And wouldn't an omniscient God be able to tell that you simply took out a fire insurance policy and not true belief and conviction? Number 9. You became an atheist? Well, you were never truly saved to begin with. Any ex-believer can relate to this one. Apparently, anyone who was a person of faith and then walked away from God must not have been the real thing. You were a pretender. Superficial. You did it wrong. In a related note, everyone who has decided to eliminate junk food from their diets must have never eaten the right junk food. And number 10. To understand the Bible, you have to study the original Hebrew and Greek. Well, of course. Why would God speak to each of his children plainly when he can communicate through ancient texts written by unverifiable authors, subjectively translated into hundreds of different versions and thousands of languages by imperfect humans over thousands of years? Meanwhile, in modern-day Zimbabwe, one of the poorest countries in the world, a 99-year-old woman named Kamali was able to send a perfectly clear, unambiguous, and completely understandable email message halfway around the world to her great-great-grandchildren, who did not have to argue over its origin, authenticity, or meaning. For this reason, if you'd like to start worshiping Kamali instead of Yahweh, I think we'd all understand. And that's round 2 of our top 10 favorite creationist arguments. If any of this seemed unclear or incorrect to you, we'd like to use our secret 11th argument. And we know you've heard that one before.